William Harris stood outside the condominium that had cost him 150,000 Australian dollars, staring at a door that would not open with the keys in his trembling hand. The mid-morning sun beat down on Pattaya's third road as motorcycle taxis roared past, their drivers oblivious to the 60-year-old Australian man whose entire world was collapsing behind a locked door on the 7th floor of a building he believed he owned. Bill tried the key again, jiggling it desperately in the lock as if persistence alone could change the reality of what was happening. Through the door, he could hear movement voices speaking Thai, the sound of furniture being moved, children laughing. Someone else was living in the condominium that Chanya had promised would be their future together, their rental income, their security for the retirement years Bill had worked 40 years to earn. 3 months earlier, this building had represented hope. Chanya Ratnapong, the 28-year-old woman Bill had met in a walking street bar and fallen desperately in love with, had stood beside him right here as Thai officials processed the ownership paperwork. She had cried tears of gratitude, telling him he had changed her life, that he was the kindest man she had ever known, that together they would build something beautiful. Now, standing alone in a hallway that smelled of cooking oil and tropical humidity, Bill understood the devastating truth. Chanya had never loved him. The condominium had never been their shared investment. The family emergencies he had funded with another $200,000 had never existed. Every tender moment, every whispered promise, every time she had called him her husband, all of it had been meticulously calculated performance designed to separate him from every cent he owned. Bill had arrived in Thailand 11 months earlier with 620,000 Australian dollars, the proceeds from selling his plumbing business and his house in Brisbane after a painful divorce. He had believed he was starting a new chapter, building a life with a woman who saw him as more than just a source of money. Instead, he had been systematically destroyed by a professional scammer who understood exactly how to exploit a lonely man's desperate need to feel valued and loved. The door opened suddenly, and a Thai woman Bill had never seen before looked at him with confusion and alarm. Behind her, Bill could see the furniture he and Chanya had purchased together, the leather sofa, the flat-screen television, the dining table where they had eaten countless meals. But these items now belonged to strangers, and Bill himself had no legal claim to any of it. "What you want?" the woman asked in broken English, her hand on the door ready to slam it shut. Bill tried to explain that this was his condominium, that he had paid for it, that there had been a terrible mistake. But even as the words came out, he knew how foolish they sounded. The condominium was not his. It had never been his. Thai law prevented foreigners from owning property, and Bill had put everything in Chanya's name, trusting that their relationship meant she would protect his investment. That trust had been the most expensive mistake of Bill's life. At 60 years old, after 40 years of hard physical labor building a successful plumbing business, after surviving a bitter divorce that had taken half his assets, after finally believing he had found peace and companionship in Thailand, Bill Harris now had approximately $20,000 remaining in his bank account and nowhere to live except a tiny room above a bar on Pattaya's Soi Buakau. Chanya had vanished completely 2 weeks earlier, taking with her not just Bill's money, but also his belief that anyone could love him for who he was rather than what he could provide. And the worst part, the truth that kept Bill awake at night, in his small room listening to drunken tourists stumble past, was that he had seen the warning signs and ignored them all, too desperate for companionship to acknowledge what was happening, until it was far too late. If you've been enjoying the stories I create, please consider hitting the subscribe button. Your support is crucial for the growth of this channel and helps me dedicate time to making these videos despite my commitment to a full-time job. Thank you for being here. William Harris, everyone called him Bill, had never planned to end up in Thailand. Born in 1,963 inches Brisbane, Australia, he left school at 16 to apprentice as a plumber and by 25 had started his own small contracting business. Harris Plumbing Services grew steadily over 3 decades. Bill built a solid reputation for honest work and fair prices. His client base consisted mostly of residential homeowners in Brisbane's outer suburbs. The work was physically demanding, but by his 50s, Bill had built something valuable, a business generating consistent income. Bill had married young to Sharon. They had 2 children, Jason and Emma, and lived comfortably in Kapalaba. But the marriage was troubled for years. Sharon resented Bill's long working hours. Bill resented Sharon's constant criticism. By their 40s, they were living as roommates rather than partners. The divorce was finalized in 2020, made bitter by disputes over assets. Sharon received half the house in business value, forcing Bill to take loans. The children chose to live with their mother, visiting Bill only occasionally. The divorce left Bill devastated financially and emotionally. He continued running the plumbing business, but the joy had evaporated. He was going through motions, servicing divorce debt, and going home alone to a small rental apartment. By 2023, Bill decided he could not continue indefinitely. He was 60 years old, physically worn down from decades of hard labor, and emotionally exhausted from loneliness. His children were adults with their own lives. Sharon had remarried and seemed happy. Bill realized that continuing another decade would only accumulate more lonely years while his body deteriorated. He needed radical change. The idea of retiring to Thailand came from conversations with other tradesmen. Several had moved to Thailand after retirement or divorce, speaking enthusiastically about warm weather, low costs, and the possibility of finding companionship. In March 2023, Bill sold Harris Plumbing for $280,000 and sold his remaining house share for $340,000. After debts, he had approximately 620,000 Australian dollars, his entire accumulated wealth from 40 years. His children were concerned. "Dad, please be careful," Emma said. "Don't trust anyone with your money, no matter how nice they seem." Bill assured her he would be careful, that he simply wanted to live somewhere warm where his savings would stretch further. In August 2023, Bill boarded a one-way flight to Bangkok. He had burned bridges with his old life. If Thailand was a mistake, he had no easy path back. What Bill did not know was that within weeks, he would meet a woman who would make him believe he had found a fresh start, and that belief would lead to the most devastating betrayal of his life. Bill's first week in Pattaya was overwhelming. The city was chaotic: tourists, motorcycles, street vendors, bars that never closed. His Jomtien condominium was relatively quiet, but even there the energy felt relentless. On his fifth evening, Bill visited Walking Street. He stopped at Dreamgirl's bar, choosing it because the music was less deafening. Inside, Bill ordered a beer. Several women approached, asking for company and drinks. Bill politely declined. Then a voice beside him said, "First time in Pattaya?" Bill turned to see a young Thai woman with a warm, genuine smile. She was beautiful in an understated way. Minimal makeup, casual clothes. "I am Chanya. I manage the bar." They began talking. Chanya asked where he was from, what brought him to Thailand. Bill found himself sharing about the divorce, selling his business, hoping to find simpler life. "It is brave to start over at your age," Chanya said. "Many people just accept unhappiness and never try to change." They talked for 2 hours. Chanya spoke about growing up poor in Aizen, coming to Pattaya at 18, sending money home to support family. She spoke about bar work without shame but also without enthusiasm, just a job that paid enough to fulfill family obligations. "I do not like this life," Chanya said quietly. "Every night, smile for drunk men, but my family needs money." Bill felt sympathy. She seemed different, more intelligent, more honest. When Bill prepared to leave, he tried to tip Chanya 500 baht. She refused. "You do not need to pay me. We just talked like friends." Bill was touched. "Can I see you again? Maybe for dinner or coffee somewhere?" Chanya smiled. "You have kind eyes, not like other Farang." "Yes, I would like that." They exchanged numbers, and Bill walked back feeling more hopeful than he had in months. What Bill did not know was that the entire encounter had been orchestrated. Chanya had been watching him, evaluating whether he fit her target profile. Everything about Bill suggested he was ideal: older, recently divorced, newly arrived, clearly uncomfortable, likely possessing substantial savings. Chanya's refusal of the tip was strategic. By rejecting money, she differentiated herself and began building the trust that would later allow her to extract far more than 500 baht. The trap had been set with extraordinary skill. The relationship between Bill and Chanya developed with surprising speed. They began seeing each other almost daily: coffee in the mornings, before Chanya supposedly went to work, dinners at small local restaurants in the evenings, walks along Jomtien Beach where they would talk for hours about their lives and dreams. Chanya was careful to maintain boundaries during the first 2 weeks. She insisted on paying for her own meals, declined Bill's offers to buy her clothes or jewelry, and did not ask for any financial help, despite mentioning occasionally how difficult it was to support her family on bar wages. This restraint was calculated. Chania understood that moving too quickly would trigger suspicion, but building genuine seeming affection first would make later financial requests feel natural rather than exploitative. Bill found himself falling for Chania in ways he had not experienced since the early years of his marriage to Sharon. Chania was attentive, affectionate, and seemed genuinely interested in his stories about life in Australia and his years running the plumbing business. She laughed at his jokes, listened patiently when he talked about his children, and never made him feel old or foolish despite their 32-year age difference. "You are different from other foreign men I meet," Chania told Bill one evening as they sat on the beach watching the sunset. "Most just want young girlfriend to show to their friends, someone who makes them feel powerful. But you talk to me like I am real person, like my thoughts matter. This is why I like spending time with you." Bill felt his heart swell with emotion. This was exactly what he had been hoping to find in Thailand, someone who valued him for his character, rather than judging him by his age or his fading physical appearance. In late September, about 6 weeks after they met, Chania told Bill she had quit her job at the bar. She could not continue that work, she explained. Now that she had feelings for him, it felt disrespectful to their relationship for her to be in an environment where men constantly propositioned her. "But I do not know how I will support my family now," Chania said with visible worry. "The bar paid me 30,000 baht per month. Without that income, my parents will suffer. My little sister needs money for school. My brother has medical expenses. I know it is not your responsibility, but I do not know what else to do." Bill immediately offered to help. 30,000 baht was roughly 1,200 Australian dollars, a significant amount for Chania, but manageable from Bill's savings. "I will give you the money to send to your family," Bill said. "You should not have to work in a bar anymore. You deserve better than that." Chania cried and thanked Bill profusely, saying he was the kindest man she had ever known, that karma had brought them together. She insisted she would find other work soon, maybe as a restaurant server or hotel receptionist, but in the meantime, Bill's help would prevent her family from suffering. This marked the beginning of regular financial transfers. Bill sent Chania 30,000 baht monthly, believing he was temporarily supporting her family until she found respectable employment. But weeks turned into months, and Chania always had reasons why she had not yet secured other work interviews that went nowhere, jobs that paid too little, positions that required skills she did not have. By November, Bill and Chania were essentially living together. She stayed at his Jomtien condominium most nights, cooked meals for him, cleaned and organized his space, and made him feel cared for in ways he had not experienced since the early years of his marriage. Bill began introducing Chania to other expatriates as his girlfriend, and she referred to him as her husband, though they were not legally married. In December, Chania took Bill to her village in Aizen to meet her family. The trip was long and uncomfortable, a 9-hour bus ride through increasingly rural landscapes, but Bill felt it was important to show respect for Chania's background and her family obligations. The village was small and obviously poor, with modest wooden houses and dirt roads. Chania's parents welcomed Bill warmly despite the language barrier. Her mother cried when Bill gave her 10,000 baht as a gift, and her father gripped Bill's hand emotionally while speaking in Thai that Chania translated as expressions of gratitude for treating their daughter well. Bill was moved by the family's genuine poverty and their obvious relief that Chania had found a foreign man who seemed kind and financially stable. He gave Chania an additional 20,000 baht to leave with her family for emergencies, and they spent the night in the family's home despite the basic accommodations and uncomfortable heat. The visit strengthened Bill's conviction that his relationship with Chania was real. Her family seemed authentic rather than performing for his benefit, and their circumstances explained why Chania had been working in bars, despite clearly being intelligent enough for better employment. In January 2024, Chania began discussing the future with increasing seriousness. "I love you and I want to build a life with you," she told Bill. "But we cannot live in rented condominium forever. We should buy our own place, something that belongs to us, that we can make into real home." Bill had been thinking about this as well. His 3-month rental would end in February, and he needed to decide whether to renew or find something more permanent. The idea of owning property in Thailand appealed to him. It would feel like commitment to his new life, rather than just temporary escape from Australia. I have been looking at properties, Chanya continued. There is beautiful condominium for sale in Pattaya, 2 bedrooms, nice view, good location. The price is 3,500,000 baht, about 140,000 Australian dollars. If we buy it, we can live there together and maybe rent out the 2nd bedroom to tourists for extra income. Bill was intrigued but cautious. Can foreigners own condominiums in Thailand? Chanya explained that condominiums were different from land and houses. Foreigners could own condos if the building was at least 51% Thai-owned, and Bill could purchase in his own name. However, she suggested it might be better to purchase in her name for tax reasons and because she could negotiate better prices as a Thai citizen. But I trust you completely, Chanya said. If you want your name on the title, that is okay. I just want us to have a home together. I do not care whose name is on the paper. This statement was carefully crafted to make Bill feel that Chanya was not pursuing his money. By offering to put the property in his name, she created the impression that ownership was not her primary concern. Bill, wanting to demonstrate his trust and commitment, insisted that putting the condominium in Chanya's name was fine, as long as they had a clear agreement about their shared ownership. In February 2024, Bill transferred 3,500,000 baht, approximately 140,000 Australian dollars, to a Thai property agent that Chanya had connected him with. The purchase process took several weeks, with numerous documents in Thai that Bill could not read, but Chanya assured him were standard property transfer paperwork. When the transaction completed, the condominium was registered entirely in Chanya's name. Bill received no formal ownership documents, no contract protecting his investment, and no legal rights to the property. But he trusted Chanya completely, and she cried tears of gratitude while thanking him for giving her the first home she had ever owned. What Bill did not know was that the property agent was actually Chanya's cousin, that the condominium had been purchased for significantly less than 3,500,000 baht, and that the difference had been immediately distributed between Chanya and her network of collaborators. Bill had not purchased a home for himself and Chanya. He had simply transferred 140,000 Australian dollars to a woman who was systematically robbing him while performing the role of devoted girlfriend. The trap was closing around Bill Harris, and he remained completely oblivious, too grateful to have found love again to question any of the financial arrangements that were destroying his retirement security. For several months after purchasing the condominium, Bill felt he had finally achieved what he had come to Thailand seeking. He woke each morning in a space he believed was his home, shared meals with a woman he loved, and spent his days exploring Pattaya with the comfortable knowledge that he had somewhere permanent to return to. Chanya continued performing the role of devoted partner with extraordinary consistency. She cooked Bill's favorite meals, maintained the condominium spotlessly, and showed physical affection that made him feel desired despite his age. She introduced Bill to other Thai women who were dating foreign men, creating a social network that made Bill feel integrated into expatriate life rather than isolated as a newcomer. Bill's monthly living expenses in Thailand were remarkably low compared to Australia. Between his rent, food, utilities, and entertainment, he was spending approximately 60,000 baht monthly, about 2,400 Australian dollars. This was far less than his life in Brisbane had cost, and combined with the monthly 30,000 baht he gave Chanya for her family, his savings were declining slowly enough that he felt confident they would last throughout his retirement. In June 2024, Chanya began discussing a new opportunity that she believed could improve their financial situation. Her friend, she explained, owned a small restaurant in Jomtien that was struggling financially and looking for investment partners. If they invested 500,000 baht, about 20,000 Australian dollars, they could become part owners and receive a share of the profits. This is not just about money, Chanya explained enthusiastically. I have always dreamed of owning a restaurant. With your business experience and my knowledge of Thai food, we could make this very successful, and you would have something to do instead of just sitting around being retired. You are too young to do nothing all day. Bill was intrigued by this proposal. He had been feeling somewhat purposeless in Thailand, spending his days without any particular goals or projects. The idea of being involved in a small business, even as a passive investor, appealed to the entrepreneur he had been in Australia. Chanya took Bill to meet her friend, who supposedly owned the restaurant, a Thai woman in her 40s, who spoke little English but smiled warmly and showed them around the small establishment. Through Chanya's translation, the woman explained that she needed capital to renovate the kitchen, upgrade equipment, and expand the menu. Bill agreed to invest 500,000 baht on the condition that he received formal documentation of his ownership stake. Chanya arranged for what appeared to be legal partnership agreements, all in Thai, that supposedly guaranteed Bill's 20% ownership of the business. The money was transferred, and for several weeks, Chanya brought home stories about renovations and improvements happening at the restaurant. She showed Bill photographs of new equipment being installed and menus being redesigned. Bill felt good about supporting a legitimate business venture rather than simply watching his savings decline through living expenses. What Bill did not know was that the restaurant owner was another member of Chanya's scam network, that no actual renovations were taking place, and that the partnership documents were worthless forgeries. The 500,000 baht had been immediately divided among the network, with Chanya receiving the largest share. In August 2024, Chanya came to Bill with tears streaming down her face and news that would trigger the largest financial transfer of their entire relationship. Her father, she explained between sobs, had been diagnosed with liver disease and needed expensive medical treatment. The family had no health insurance, and without immediate intervention, he would die within months. "I do not know what to do," Chanya cried. "The hospital says treatment will cost 200,000 baht, maybe more. My family has no money. I have already given them everything I can. I cannot let my father die, but I have nowhere to turn." Bill felt his heart break watching Chanya's distress. He had met her father during the trip to Aizen, and the elderly man had seemed kind and dignified despite his poverty. The idea of him suffering from a treatable illness simply because the family could not afford medical care was intolerable. "We will take care of it," Bill said firmly. "I will pay for your father's treatment. Family is the most important thing, and I am part of your family now." Chanya cried harder, but now the tears seemed to be relief mixed with gratitude. She hugged Bill tightly and told him he was saving her father's life, that she would never forget his kindness, that karma would reward his generosity. Over the next 2 weeks, Bill transferred a total of 220,000 baht, approximately 8,800 Australian dollars, for what Chanya described as her father's hospitalization, medications, and specialist consultations. She showed Bill hospital receipts and medical documents, all in Thai, that supposedly confirmed the treatments. But Chanya's father was not sick. The medical crisis was entirely fabricated, and the hospital documents were forgeries created by members of Chanya's network who specialized in producing fake paperwork for various scam scenarios. The 220,000 baht had been distributed offshore, and Bill's savings had been further depleted while he believed he was performing a moral duty. In September 2024, Chanya introduced a final major financial request that would consume most of Bill's remaining liquid savings. Her family, she explained, had an opportunity to purchase farmland adjacent to their property in Aizen. A wealthy neighbor was selling 5 ray of land about 8,000 square meters for 3 million baht because he needed cash urgently for his own business problems. "This is very good opportunity," Chanya explained. "Land in Thailand always increases in value, and my family could grow crops or maybe sell it later for profit. But they need 3 million baht quickly, or the neighbor will sell to someone else. I know it is a lot of money, but this could secure my family's future forever." Bill was hesitant about such a large expense. 3 million baht was approximately 120,000 Australian dollars, a substantial portion of his remaining savings. He suggested that perhaps they could invest a smaller amount or help Chanya's family secure a loan rather than purchasing the land outright. But Chanya became emotional when Bill suggested alternatives. "I thought you cared about my family," she said, her voice breaking. "You spend all this money on condominium and restaurant, but when my family needs help for something that could change their lives, suddenly it is too much? Maybe you only care about things that benefit you, not about people I love." This accusation stung Bill deeply. He had never thought of his financial support as selfish, and the suggestion that he was withholding help from Chanya's family felt like a betrayal of everything he believed about himself as a generous person. "Of course I care about your family," Bill said, trying to reassure Chanya. "I just want to make sure we are making smart financial decisions. But if this land purchase is really so important, we will find a way to make it work." In late September, Bill transferred 3 million baht to an account that Chanya said belonged to her family's lawyer who was handling the land purchase. She showed Bill documents that supposedly confirmed the transaction and promised that within weeks, the land title would be transferred to her parents' names. Bill's savings had now been reduced to approximately 80,000 Australian dollars, less than 15% of what he had arrived in Thailand with 13 months earlier. But he was not yet panicked, because he believed his money had been invested rather than simply spent. The condominium, the restaurant partnership, and the farmland all represented assets that, at least in theory, added to his net worth even if they were not immediately liquid. What Bill did not understand was that none of these assets actually existed in any form that benefited him. The condominium was entirely in Chanya's name, with no legal protection for his investment. The restaurant partnership was a fiction based on worthless documents, and the farmland purchase had never occurred. The money had been immediately distributed among Chanya's network. Bill Harris, experienced businessman who had built a successful plumbing company over 3 decades, had been systematically defrauded in ways that would have been obvious if he had been analyzing someone else's situation. But when the fraud victim is yourself, and the perpetrator is someone you love who seems to need your help, even business experience becomes useless against the power of emotional manipulation. The beginning of the end came in mid-October 2024, though Bill did not recognize it immediately. Chanya began spending more time away from the condominium, explaining that her father's health was worsening and she needed to return to Aizen frequently to help care for him. She would leave for 3 or 4 days at a time, calling Bill daily to update him on her father's condition and express how much she missed him. Bill accepted these absences without suspicion. He had grown accustomed to Chanya's devotion and did not question whether her reasons for being away were legitimate. During her absences, he spent time with other expatriates he had met, explored different areas of Pattaya, and generally filled his days with activities that made retirement feel purposeful rather than empty. In early November, Chanya told Bill she needed to take an extended trip to Aizen, possibly 2 weeks, because her father was entering a critical stage of treatment. She seemed genuinely distressed, and Bill reassured her that she should stay with her family as long as needed, that he would be fine on his own. The night before Chanya left, she was particularly affectionate, telling Bill repeatedly how much she loved him and how grateful she was for everything he had done for her and her family. She made his favorite meal, they watched a movie together, and she held him close as they fell asleep. Bill remembered feeling deeply content, believing he had finally built the life in Thailand that he had hoped for. Chanya left early the next morning while Bill was still sleeping. When he woke and found her gone, he saw a note on the kitchen counter written in her careful handwriting. "Gone to help family. Love you so much. Back soon. Your Chanya." For the first 3 days, everything seemed normal. Chanya called or messaged several times daily, describing her father's condition and the challenges her family faced. Then, the communication began to slow texts instead of calls, generic updates instead of detailed information. By the end of the first week, Chanya was responding to Bill's messages with increasing delays, sometimes taking 6 or 8 hours to reply. Bill began to feel uneasy, though he tried to convince himself that Chanya was simply overwhelmed with family responsibilities. He sent messages asking when she thought she might return, whether she needed additional money for her father's care, whether everything was okay. Her responses were brief and vague. "Father still sick. Need more time. Love you." On the 10th day of Chanya's absence, Bill woke to find his phone flooded with notifications from his Australian bank. Multiple large withdrawals had been attempted from his account over the previous 24 hours, and the bank's fraud detection system had frozen the account pending verification. Bill's heart began racing as he realized the withdrawal attempts totaled nearly 60,000 Australian dollars, almost all of his remaining accessible savings. Bill immediately called the bank's international emergency line. The representative explained that someone had attempted to withdraw money using online banking credentials, but the unusual activity had triggered security protocols. Bill confirmed he had not made these transactions, and the bank promised to investigate while keeping the account frozen. Panic overwhelmed Bill as he tried to call Chanya. The number went directly to voicemail. He tried repeatedly throughout the morning calls, text messages, Line app messages, but received no response. He reached out to Chanya's friends whose numbers he had saved, but they either did not answer or claimed they had not heard from Chanya recently. In desperation, Bill decided to visit the condominium's management office to ensure there were no issues with the property. He had not bothered to do this during Chanya's absence because he assumed everything was fine, but now he needed to verify that at least one of his supposed assets remained secure. The property manager, a middle-aged Thai woman who spoke adequate English, looked confused when Bill identified himself as the owner. "This unit is not owned by you," she said, pulling up records on her computer. "It is owned by Miss Chanya Ratanapong. There is no foreign name on the ownership documents." Bill explained that he had paid for the condominium and that it was supposed to be their shared property. The manager showed him the official registration, which listed only Chanya's name, with no mention of Bill or any agreement about shared ownership. "I am sorry, but according to our records, you are not the owner," the manager said sympathetically. "If you paid for this property, you should have legal contract protecting your investment. Without that, you have no rights to this unit." Bill felt his stomach drop. He asked whether the condominium could be sold without his knowledge or consent, and the manager confirmed that Chanya, as the registered owner, could sell the property at any time without needing Bill's approval or even informing him. "Has there been any activity on this unit recently?" Bill asked, his voice shaking. "Any paperwork filed? Any changes to the registration?" The manager checked the system again. "There was power of attorney document filed 2 weeks ago. This allows someone else to manage or sell the property on behalf of the owner. I do not have details about who holds this power of attorney." Bill left the management office feeling physically ill. The pattern was becoming undeniable. Chanya's extended absence, the withdrawal attempts on his bank account, the power of attorney that would allow the condominium to be sold without her presence. Everything pointed to a conclusion he had been desperately trying to avoid acknowledging. He returned to the condominium and began searching through Chanya's belongings, looking for any clues about where she might actually be. He discovered that most of her clothes and personal items were gone, removed so gradually during her recent absences that he had not noticed the accumulation of what was missing. In the back of a drawer, Bill found documents he had never seen before, printed screenshots of online conversations between Chanya and other foreign men occurring during the same period she had been with Bill. The messages were flirtatious and manipulative, with Chanya using similar language and tactics that she had used with Bill to extract money from other men for various fake emergencies. Bill also found a notebook with names, amounts, and dates written in Thai and English. Though he could not read the Thai portions, the English notes were clear enough. Lists of foreign men with notations about how much money had been obtained from each one, timelines for various scams, and what appeared to be contact information for other members of a criminal network. The devastating reality was now impossible to deny. Chanya had never loved Bill. Every moment of their relationship had been performance. Every expression of gratitude had been manipulation, and every financial transaction had been theft, disguised as partnership or family emergency. Bill had been systematically robbed by a professional scammer who had identified him as an easy target and had executed a near-perfect fraud over 13 months. Bill spent that night sitting in the condominium that he had paid for but did not own, trying to comprehend how thoroughly he had been deceived. He had sold his house, liquidated his business, left his children and his country, all to build a new life with someone who had never seen him as anything except a source of money. His life savings of 620,000 Australian dollars had been reduced to approximately $20,000, still protected by his bank's fraud detection system. The condominium, restaurant investment, and farmland he believed he owned were all either in Chanya's name or never existed at all. At 60 years old, after 40 years of hard work, Bill Harris had been financially destroyed by a woman 32 years younger who had played him perfectly from their first conversation in a walking street bar. In the days following the realization of Chanya's betrayal, Bill moved through the stages of crisis response that define how humans process devastating loss. First came denial, the desperate hope that there had been some terrible misunderstanding, that Chanya would call with a reasonable explanation that would make everything make sense. But the calls never came, and reality slowly overwhelmed hope. Next came desperate investigation. Bill filed a police report at the Pattaya police station, bringing all documentation he could gather about the property purchase, the restaurant investment, and the various financial transfers. The officer taking his report was professionally courteous but not encouraging about prospects for recovery or justice. "This is a very difficult situation," the officer explained in careful English. "You say you paid for condominium, but property is registered in Thai woman's name. You gave money voluntarily for investments and family emergencies. Very hard to prove this is criminal fraud, and not just relationship that ended badly. Bill tried to explain that systematic deception over 13 months with the specific intent to steal money was obviously criminal fraud, regardless of whether he had technically made voluntary transfers. But the officer gently suggested that Bill consult with a lawyer about civil remedies rather than expecting criminal prosecution. The lawyer Bill consulted provided more detailed but equally discouraging assessment. Because the condominium was registered entirely in Chanya's name and Bill had no written contract protecting his investment, he had essentially gifted her 140,000 Australian dollars under Thai law. The restaurant investment was harder to evaluate without knowing whether the business actually existed and what the partnership documents said, but the lawyer suspected they were either fraudulent or contained clauses that protected Chanya while exposing Bill. The fundamental problem, the lawyer explained, is that you trusted someone with complete financial access and put major assets in her name without legal protection. Thai courts generally do not intervene in situations where foreigners voluntarily give money to Thai partners unless there is very clear evidence of criminal conspiracy. The lawyer offered to investigate further for a retainer of 150,000 baht, approximately 6,000 Australian dollars. Bill could not afford this given his depleted savings, and he sensed the lawyer was skeptical about recovering anything, even with extended legal action. Bill also tried to contact Chanya's family in Aizen, hiring a Thai translator to help him make phone calls. The phone number Chanya had given him for her parents was disconnected. When Bill hired a private investigator to visit the village where he had met Chanya's family, the investigator reported that no one in the area had heard of anyone matching the family's description, and the house Bill remembered visiting was occupied by completely different people who had lived there for many years. The family he had met, the crying mother, the grateful father, the siblings who supposedly needed support, had all been actors recruited specifically to make Bill believe Chanya had genuine family obligations. The emotional visit to Aizen, which had so powerfully convinced Bill that Chanya's background was authentic, had been elaborate theater designed to extract larger sums of money by creating moral obligation. The investigator did discover information about Chanya herself. She was known in certain Pattaya circles as someone involved in romance scams targeting older Western men. There had been at least 3 previous victims that the investigator could identify: an American in 2021, a British man in 2022, and a German in early 2023. All had similar stories of investing in properties or businesses that turned out to be fraudulent, sending money for fake family emergencies, and eventually being abandoned when their savings were exhausted. None of the previous victims had successfully prosecuted Chanya or recovered their money. Thai authorities seemed reluctant to pursue cases that appeared to be relationship disputes rather than clear-cut theft, and Chanya was skilled at structuring her scams to appear voluntary rather than criminal. Most devastatingly, the investigator explained that Chanya was likely not operating alone, but was part of an organized network that specialized in identifying wealthy foreign targets, cultivating relationships, and systematically extracting funds through coordinated fraud involving fake businesses, fake families, and fake emergencies. She will have already moved to a different city, or possibly different country, the investigator told Bill. People like her work in cycles target area for a year or two until too many victims complain, then relocate and start again with new identity. Very difficult to find, and even more difficult to prosecute. After 3 weeks of investigation, Bill had to accept the terrible reality. He would almost certainly never see Chanya again, never recover any of the money she had stolen, and never receive any form of justice through legal channels. At 60 years old, he had been comprehensively defeated by a scam so sophisticated that even recognizing it was happening had been nearly impossible until it was far too late. The psychological damage was almost more devastating than the financial loss. Bill had not just been robbed, he had been completely deceived about every aspect of a relationship he believed was the most important of his life since his marriage. Every moment of affection, every expression of love, every intimate conversation, all of it had been performance, and Bill had been too desperate for companionship to see through the act. He replayed conversations and events, trying to identify where he had missed warning signs. The answer was that warning signs had been present throughout Chanya's quick transition from bar worker to full financial dependence, the major purchases all registered in her name, the constant stream of family emergencies, the reluctance to formalize their relationship legally. But Bill had ignored or rationalized every concern, because acknowledging them would have meant accepting that the love he had found was not real. The violation ran deeper than money or property. Chania had stolen 13 months of Bill's life, months he had believed were the beginning of his second chance, but which had actually been the systematic destruction of his financial security and emotional well-being. By December 2024, Bill had been forced to move from the condominium he purchased. Chania had sold it using power of attorney. The new owners asked Bill to vacate within 2 weeks. Bill moved to a tiny room above a bar on Soy Buakaw, 15 square meters with shared bathroom. Monthly rent was 7,000 baht. His remaining savings, 20,000 Australian dollars. Daily expenses were 25,000 baht monthly. His savings would last 2 years at most, then nothing. He contacted his children. Emma cried, saying she wished he had listened to warnings. Jason was angry, asking how Bill could have been so stupid. "Dad, come home," Emma said. "We will help you rebuild." But Bill could not return to Australia. Returning meant admitting complete failure. He imagined the pity, the judgment. So Bill stayed in Pattaya, trapped by shame and lack of resources. He became one of the aging expatriates living in cheap accommodations, eating street food, spending days nursing single beers. Bill encountered other scammed men, an American named Frank, who lost $400,000 to fake rubber plantation investment, a Swedish man whose girlfriend sold his house while he was abroad. "The police don't care," Frank said. "To them, we're stupid foreigners who got what we deserved." Bill's health declined: high blood pressure, insomnia, digestive problems. He could not afford proper treatment. His days followed depressing routine. Wake late, eat cheap breakfast, walk Pattaya filling empty hours, return to room, watch movies until exhaustion allowed sleep. At 60, after 40 years of hard labor, Bill lived in a tiny room with $20,000 remaining from $620,000. Throughout 2025, Bill's situation deteriorated. Unavoidable expenses depleted his savings, visa fees, minor medical treatments, replacement clothes. By mid-year, he had less than 10,000 Australian dollars. Bill tried finding work, but options for 61-year-old foreigners were extremely limited. Teaching required certifications he lacked. Manual labor paid too little for survival. He registered with online freelancing platforms, but received minimal responses. The few clients paid 2,000 or 3,000 baht monthly, far below what he needed. Emma sent occasional transfers, $500 or $1,000, but expressed frustration that Bill refused to return where she and Jason could help more. "Dad, you're being stubborn, and it's killing you," Emma said during a video call. "Just come home. Pride isn't worth dying alone in a Thai slum." In August 2025, Bill received a message from another Australian victim named Colin, who had also been scammed by Chania in 2022, losing $300,000. "I've been trying to track her for years," Colin wrote. "She's either connected to people who protect her or very good at disappearing." Colin's investigator identified at least 7 confirmed victims over 5 years, with total losses exceeding $2 million. But neither Thai nor international authorities showed interest in prosecution. "Everything looks legal on paper," Colin explained. "She doesn't steal at gunpoint. She builds relationships and asks for help. Proving criminal intent is almost impossible." By late 2025, Bill's savings were nearly exhausted, $3,000 or $4,000 remaining. Emma made urgent pleas for him to return, even offering to purchase tickets. But Bill continued refusing, unable to overcome psychological barriers of admitting defeat. Bill Harris's situation had reached a point of crisis that could no longer be ignored. His savings were completely exhausted, his visa was expiring, and he had no legal way to remain in Thailand without funds. He faced a stark choice: accept his daughter's offer of repatriation assistance and return to Australia in defeat, or remain illegally and face eventual arrest and deportation. One October morning, Bill finally made the phone call to Emma he had been avoiding. "I need to come home," he said quietly, his voice breaking. "I can't survive here anymore. Can you still help me get back?" Emma cried with relief and immediately began arranging his return. She purchased a plane ticket, coordinated with the Australian consulate, and prepared her guest room. The day before departure, Bill walked through Pattaya one final time. He passed the condominium building that had cost him 140,000 Australian dollars, but which he had never actually owned. He walked down Walking Street where he had first met Chanya. Bill felt overwhelming regret, not just about trusting Chanya, but about all the decisions that led him to Thailand. If he had stayed in Australia, maintained his business longer, accepted loneliness rather than seeking adventure, he would still have his savings and dignity intact. In late October 2025, Bill boarded a plane at Suvarnabhumi Airport with a single small suitcase. He had arrived in Thailand 14 months earlier with 620,000 Australian dollars and dreams of a fresh start. He was leaving with nothing except debt to his daughter for the ticket and crushing shame about how thoroughly he had been deceived. Bill Harris now lives in his daughter Emma's guest room in Brisbane, trying to rebuild some minimal financial stability at age 61. He receives a small government pension that covers basic expenses, and he occasionally finds casual plumbing work through former industry contacts willing to hire him despite his situation. His relationship with his children has improved somewhat now that he has returned and accepted their help, but the dynamic has fundamentally changed. Bill is no longer the capable provider. He is the dependent who made catastrophic decisions and now relies on his children's generosity. He has not spoken to his ex-wife Sharon since returning, unable to face that conversation. He imagines she knows through mutual acquaintances. Bill rarely discusses his time in Thailand. When people ask about his retirement adventure, he offers vague explanations about things not working out. The full truth is too humiliating to share, except with his children and a therapist he sees weekly. She took my heart first that made it easy to take everything else. Bill tells the few people willing to hear his story. I wanted so desperately to believe someone could love me after the divorce, and Chanya understood exactly what I needed to hear. He pauses, his voice quieter. The worst part is I still don't know what was real. Was any moment genuine, or was every single day over 13 months just performance? Bill has joined an online support group for romance scam victims, finding some comfort in connecting with others who experienced similar devastation. But these conversations also reinforce how common such scams are and how rarely victims see justice. His health has improved somewhat with Australian medical care, but he struggles with depression, anxiety, and insomnia. He takes medication daily and attends therapy weekly. Bill's daily life consists of occasional plumbing jobs, therapy appointments, and long hours alone in Emma's guest room. He is alive and no longer facing homelessness, but the comfortable retirement he worked 40 years to achieve is permanently destroyed. Recently, Bill learned through Colin that Chanya had been involved in another scam, targeting a Norwegian man in Chiang Mai. The victim lost approximately $300,000 before she disappeared again. Despite this evidence and Colin's continued efforts, no arrests were made. Bill Harris came to Thailand in 2023 at age 60, seeking warmth, companionship, and a fresh start after divorce and business success. He believed he had found all three with Chanya Ratnapong. Instead, he found a professional predator who identified his vulnerabilities, exploited his desperate need for love, and systematically destroyed his financial security over 13 months before vanishing with more than $500,000 Australian dollars. At 61, Bill lives as a dependent in his daughter's home, working occasional casual jobs and existing on minimal pension income. The house he sold to fund his Thailand adventure is gone. The successful business he built over 30 years is gone. The retirement savings that should have lasted the rest of his life are gone. And the woman responsible remains free and unpunished, likely targeting other lonely men somewhere else in Southeast Asia, using the same tactics that proved so devastatingly effective against Bill and at least 7 other victims, whose lives she destroyed through perfectly calibrated lies. Bill's story is not about foolishness or cultural ignorance. It is about how even intelligent, successful, cautious people can be destroyed when professional scammers identify their emotional vulnerabilities and exploit them with extraordinary skill and patience. It is about how loneliness can overwhelm years of business experience and practical caution, and it is about how some traps are constructed not from obvious lies, but from perfectly performed affection delivered by someone who understands exactly what you need to believe. If this story has helped you understand the devastating reality of romance fraud in Thailand, please subscribe to this channel. Bill Harris's experience is tragically common. Thousands of men lose their life savings every year to similar scams, and most suffer in silence due to shame and embarrassment. The more awareness we build, the fewer lives will be destroyed. Share this story with anyone planning to retire overseas. And remember, love should never require you to give up all financial security or legal protection. Thank you for watching, and please protect yourself and those you care about.